I want to start today's episode with a situation that happens more often than people realize. A parent passes away, or a couple goes through a divorce, or siblings who used to get along suddenly find themselves arguing over decisions about money, property, or care for an aging parent. In moments like these, emotions are high, relationships can be strained, and yet important financial and legal decisions still have to be made. These are the types of situations where families often wish there were someone neutral, experienced, and trustworthy who could step in to help guide the process. Someone who understands the financial side, the legal side, and the human side. That's where professional fiduciaries often come in. Hi, I'm Dale Corpus, a senior transition specialist and seniors real estate expert based in the San Francisco Bay Area. As someone in the sandwich generation myself, I know how overwhelming it can be to juggle work, parenting, and aging parents, often while trying to make major decisions inside systems that don't always make things easy to understand. That's exactly why I created the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast. This show brings together professionals across the senior care ecosystem, from attorneys and fiduciaries to healthcare leaders, senior living experts, and care managers, so families and professionals alike can better understand how all the pieces of the system fit together. Today's guest is Jeanette Brooks, founder of D4 Fiduciary. Jeanette helps families, trustees, and business owners navigate what she calls the 4Ds: death, divorce, disagreement, and departure. These are the moments in life when the stakes are high, emotions are complex, and decisions often can't wait. With more than 2 decades of experience in finance, executive leadership, and fiduciary services, Jeanette is often brought into situations where clarity, neutrality, and discretion are essential. In today's conversation, we're going to talk about what fiduciaries actually do, why these 4Ds can completely change the course of a family's future, and how families can prepare before a crisis happens. And if you've ever wondered what happens behind the scenes when someone has to step in and manage complicated financial or family decisions, you'll learn a lot from this conversation. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast, where we help families navigate senior living, real estate, and everything in between. Hosted by Senior Transition Specialist Dale Corpus, this show brings you expert insights, real solutions, and stress-free strategies to make senior transitions simple. Ready to dive in? Let's go.
And we're back, everybody. Jeanette, welcome to the episode today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Middle of tax season, so we're, pushing through.
That means they're busy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I appreciate your time, and let's just jump into this. Can you share the personal and professional journey that led you to become a fiduciary?
I'll start by pretty much right after college, I landed in this industry. I met someone who took me from California to Florida, unbeknownst to me, the what I call stairway to heaven, with the biggest market in wealth transition.
Yeah.
So I learned the business from the ground up as a CPA, as a corporate trustee, and then became a CFO and eventually became an independent with my own practice. I chose to go independent after working in corporate because the families that were turned away by the corporate entities that didn't fit the mold of what they were looking for were still very viable clients that I felt I could support. I had a rare skill set, which today, just having my own practice, the opportunities to grow are abundant, but the talent is not. And so I decided to set off and create the 4Ds, which in reality should be 5Ds, should be a death, divorce, business disagreement, business departure, and disability.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? That's a fascinating path into fiduciary work. It's interesting how so many people in the field come into it through like real life experiences with families and even transitions. And next question is, tell us, or actually tell us about D4 Fiduciary. Where did you even come up with that name? And, explain even how you even came up with the 4Ds.
Yeah. So you bring up a good point that for most fiduciaries on the private side, this is a second career. For me, it's always been my career. So I have a bit of an edge on the industry, being that I have done it my entire career. So I've done different facets. I have the tax background, the governance structure background, the board background, and then running my own practice as a CFO that helped me prepare to have my own practice. So the 5 Ds, which my name is 4D, but really I do practice in the 5 Ds. The natural place for wealth transition is when somebody passes. That's the obvious. We all have to have a wealth transition plan for our loved ones, or the state decides how your wealth transitions. And even though that may still be desirable for you, I can assure you that the fees are not desirable. So
Yeah.
they might be beneficial for the fiduciary, but not for the individuals inheriting the money. So death is the obvious wealth transition point. Depending on the complexity of your assets, will depend on the quality qualifiers and experience of fiduciary you bring in. Fiduciaries include, in my definition, corporate trustees or independents. What I would say is that most people who come into this industry as a second career likely are coming from a healthcare background and are qualified to practice as a in the power of attorney area, or maybe dabble in the trust side unless they've been trained into the trust side.
Yeah.
You should make sure they have a finance background. You should make sure they have experience with tax. You should make sure they have experience with entities if you're dealing with clients with business structures, and that they understand valuations of all sorts. So the private fiduciary side has a what I call the spectrum of fiduciaries, and understanding the skill sets of that individual are critical to make sure they can actually support your needs. So that's, I think at my firm, we've got a competitive edge, being that I have dealt with transitions of all sorts, death being the obvious one, divorce. The divorce piece is unique. And the way that can play a role is if people have prenups and
Yeah.
they pass away, or they have multiple marriages throughout their life and they pass away, you have to know how to, in a lot of cases, value the interest,
Yeah.
economic or different types of interest. So there's complexities that tie in directly with wealth transition. One
Yeah.
of the first ways that people lose their wealth or decrease their wealth is getting a divorce before they die. But also there's implications to divorce at death if you have planning in place, because you, even though you may have divorced somebody, you could still have wanted to provide for them after you have passed. And so knowing and understanding how divorce law may come in alignment with probate code and estate planning is a nice skill to have in this space.
Yeah. Follow-up question I have is, which of the 5 Ds do you see most often in your work, and why?
So definitely death is the most common. And I would say we're in the biggest wealth transition of our lifetime, or America's lifetime, with significant wealth having been built. Also, for me, I do specialize in individuals who own entities inside of their trust, own companies. And so for me, that's a common type of account that I would take care of.
Yeah. Now, how is your role different when you step into a family's life during a crisis versus during planned transitions?
Let's say in the case of a probate, that could be considered a crisis because there isn't any planning around it. They could have died testate or intestate, meaning they had a will but not a trust. And so there's minimal planning, meaning they could have just designated their beneficiaries but not avoided probate. There could be conflicts. Typically, there are scars that most people have at the age of about 8, and they come up when somebody passes, a parent, a loved one, and you're mostly dealing with those scars
Yeah.
while you're dealing with transition. If you have siblings that maybe didn't get along and they have to make decisions on, who keeps the lap or who keeps the car or who keeps the house, it can be very difficult. So tapping into those emotions early on and being empathetic to be able to understand the motivation everybody's got or the feelings they've got, and really help you succeed and helping the family transition into the next phase of their wealth transition.
Yeah, I can completely relate to you on that, because a lot of times when we're dealing with families, you're dealing with all of the family dynamics from when the kids still have potentially unresolved trauma in the family.
Mm,
So it's a very
right.
balance, and I get that. So can you walk us through a scenario where multiple Ds were happening at the same time?
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite examples is a family that I worked with where this gentleman built an abundant, a large company, a chain of dealerships throughout the country. And he had been divorced twice and had a third wife,
Yeah.
and really cared for his partners and really took care of them after his passing and took care of all of his children. It's probably the most unique family. They really did not disagree much on what to do. They had good consensus. The children, even though they may not have all wanted to spend a lot of time together, they were at least amicable
Right.
with me and took advice from me. And we were able to successfully transition businesses, real estate, all types of assets. The first wife was happy, the second wife was happy, and the third wife was happy. And it just because this man also did a lot of preparing, communicated well with everybody,
Yeah.
and they all knew what the plan was after his passing. I always say, even if it's difficult to have these conversations, it's best to have them as soon as possible. And maybe you don't have to talk numbers, but at least let them know what the high level plan is so that things aren't a surprise, and then they can get their emotions out while you're alive and you can talk through those decisions with them.
Yeah. That really illustrates how complex these situations can become, again, when multiple transitions are happening at once. Now, how do you approach cases where business ownership, property, or investments are part of the estate?
So almost every single account that we work with or client that we work with involves real estate.
Hmm.
And typically, unless somebody is been given a property outright, most real estate either gets sold or stays in trust to produce income. Except for we look at the cost of maintaining the, if it's commercial or rentals in the trust, the cost of keeping it in there, the fees that are going to be charged to maintain it. Do you break even? Is it worth it, or could we get a better rate in the market investing the funds?
Yeah.
Typically, we do at least have one home we have to sell. We partner up with real estate agents that are experts in this niche of the business, that understand the dynamics of dealing with the families, that have the resources to clean out properties, and have the resources to do quick fixes on properties that needed to make them market ready, that understand the markets that we're in. And those partners are rare. There might be a plethora of realtors, but I will tell you, the ones that truly understand what to do, people like you, are rare in the marketplace. And it's key to finding an individual like you
Yeah.
to have a successful sale. A typical real estate agent who's never worked in this niche may not really understand. One, the fees are a little bit lower because there are so many fees. Beneficiaries are already being charged at the trust level, at the entity level, all types of things. The work is a little bit heavier, but
Right.
the realtors that do a good job, like you, have an abundance of work.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a special niche to be in. If you're a realtor who wants to be in this niche, I recommend partnering up with someone who's already doing it, really understanding the semantics of it, and diving in. If you're somebody who has trust real estate to sell, don't just engage any realtor you know. Make sure they actually understand real estate in this space.
Yeah. Very good point. Now, let's segue into something different. Let's talk about navigating high conflict situations. How do you diffuse tension when
Yes.
siblings or heirs don't see eye to eye?
Okay. Well, this can be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that literally. So typically, if it'll be siblings that are in disagreement over something emotional.
Right.
In my case, I usually set up recurring meetings with families when we're going through the deep of the administration.
Right.
And we to stay in touch, to keep them informed on what we're doing, to make sure that I also have a pulse on where they're at and their expectations, and making sure that we're all in tone with each other. If I do know that there are siblings that have either fought against each other in court or just at home, I make sure that I have separate meetings with them. I may communicate with them on email, sending them all the same message, and then reinforce those messages over the phone, on Zoom calls, in person, just to let them know where we're at, how things are going, and letting them know as soon as big events happen is super key. I think you need to win beneficiaries' trust as soon as you can.
Yeah.
The earlier, the better. Listen to them. Being a great listener is key. They don't necessarily expect you to resolve their emotional issues. They do expect empathy from you, and you do owe that to them. And we owe to anybody, we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to them. So I think that listening is a key factor in succeeding with complex situations.
Yeah. Everything you just said resonates really well with me. It's one of the biggest challenges I feel like even in my role, and I'm assuming it's in your role too, because balancing those family dynamics, while moving the process forward, it's a learned skill. You just said, to
It is.
keep everything going smoothly. Now, what's the most challenging family dynamic you've mediated, and how did you process moving?
I would say that one of the most challenging things I've navigated wasn't per se a family dynamic. It was a business partner who wanted to get away with essentially leaving the decedent's wife destitute. The decedent, the person who passed away, originally had a prenup with his wife, which he then revoked before he passed away. His business partner knew about the prenup, but also knew about the revocation and proceeded in moving forward with selling a business because the decedent didn't fully update the governing documents to reflect that she had ownership in the business, and he knew that. So he sold the business, kept her out of the sale,
Yeah.
um, pretty much got a new wife overnight and left. And so we had to hire attorneys to represent her. She was destitute for a little while, but she was made whole after a few years. There was some, legal situations where attorneys didn't give the proper advice. And so we had to advocate for her quite strongly. She ended up doing just fine, but the hardship and the heartbreak in the experience, she lost her husband. And the one person that she thought was her husband's best friend really tried to take advantage of the situation. And so that was heartbreaking. She was a lovely lady. I did meet her husband, but nobody deserves to be treated that way. And so there's a lot of pitfalls, and you have to be ready because as a trustee, as a fiduciary, you definitely carry liability if you don't know how to defend yourself and defend your beneficiaries in these situations.
That really highlights like the human side of fiduciary work. It's not, just financial decisions. It's like family relationships too that you're dealing with. Now, are there warning signs that a situation is heading toward conflict?
I would say yes. What I like to do is I typically, for me, most of my clients I know before they pass, and I build a relationship and I get to know the most vulnerable parts of them.
Yeah.
I always say that once people trust you with their finances, they trust you with their entire life. And it absolutely is true. They will open up about everything once they've decided they trust you with their finances. So you become a trusted resource for them. And once they tell you where the pitfalls are in the family dynamics, and you dig into the structures or whatever asset holdings they have, how they hold them, you really can foresee what potentially will happen down the line. You can say, okay, well, this person potentially, the parents have not been in contact with this child and they want to provide less than the other children. Well, I know that's coming. So I have to, sometimes I say, well, can you reach out to them and let's try and see if we can talk to them and let them know what the plan is going to be. And so I encourage people to disclose as much as possible when they feel ready to do that and have the hard conversation, not only for financial reasons, financial risk mitigation, but also emotional mitigation, so that when people pass, their loved ones aren't left floundering emotionally. Because I know I will have to deal with it and that's okay. But if I can avoid them feeling that way, I always like to say that your estate plan is your last love letter to your family.
Mm.
And if you are good at communicating why you've done what you've done before you leave them feeling in the right place. And I think that's important. It keeps the world in a healthier place
Yeah.
or loving place. And so I approach my work with that frame of mind.
Yeah, I love that. Now let's talk about planning for the unexpected. Well, first question here is, what are some proactive steps families can take before they need a fiduciary?
Certainly, first and foremost, get a good estate planning attorney. And what I don't mean by good estate planning attorney is the most cost effective. What I mean by good estate planning attorney is one that understands you
Yeah.
and not one that is either pushing out a stock document or one that maybe is really interested in a very specific way of planning that maybe doesn't suit you, but you've heard through the grapevine this works. Make sure it suits you and your family and that they're the right level of attorney for what your estate plan's needs are. Make sure that they're digging deep into your family dynamics, that they're asking about those loved ones, the charities, the things that matter to you, that they're getting to the emotional pieces as much as they're getting to the estate planning pieces, the financial pieces. Because if they don't have a full picture, they really can help you plan 100%. During your conversations with estate planning attorneys, you will typically get to a point where, kind of towards the end, potentially, depending on how they do their planning, on a discussion on trustees or successor trustees or power of attorneys. And that's for the conversation on the types of individuals that can serve on your behalf, either when you're alive or when you pass, comes up. And that's where one of the options may be an independent fiduciary. Another option, if those attorneys work with corporate trustees, or, it's usually corporate trustees, fiduciaries, or family members. Family members have a natural conflict, especially if they're beneficiaries. They have embedded biases, which we all can't avoid. Independents are great if they have the right background to support you. Just because somebody's been in business 20 years and has been serving doesn't mean that they know how to serve your needs. So it's really important to dig into, okay, this is my situation. Tell me if you've dealt with a similar situation,
Yeah.
or would my situation be very different for you? And give me examples, because someone can say, yes, I can do it, but have they done it? Have they done it long enough for you to know that you're comfortable with them doing this work? But most attorneys have relationships with a gamut of different types of advisors. And so that's where your referral should come from. I always say that I like my work to come directly from attorneys and financial advisors. They know their clients best, they know me, and so then they know if I'm the right fit for them. If I have a client that calls me and says, or a prospective client that calls me and asks if they want to talk to me and set up an appointment, I typically find out who their attorney is and ask them to go back and talk to their attorney to see if they think that they should be talking to an independent fiduciary. I always circle back. I don't like cold calls. I don't think it's the best type of business in my line of work, considering it's such an intimate relationship. Yeah, so great.
Yeah. Now, for seniors without close family, what's the best way to ensure their affairs are handled well?
If a lot of nursing homes have a requirement that they have their estate plan in place. And so those nursing homes have relationships with attorneys, and those attorneys that have relationships with people like me and or banks. And so they will typically get referred by somebody within the organization. If there are seniors that are not living in a nursing home or at board and care or something like that, they're living on their own. That can be tricky, because if they waited too long to get an estate plan in place and they're alone at home, they're kind of at someone's mercy to say, hey, let me take you to an attorney. And they can be harder to reach for somebody like me.
Yeah.
But for somebody like you, who's a real estate expert and can really help these individuals create liquidity, maybe if they're at home and starting to get pinned down on finances, you can refer to somebody like me, and I can then connect them to attorneys to help them, and then see if I'm still the right fit. I always try to do the right thing, even if somebody calls me and that client isn't perfect for me, I will still get them to the next right individual. And I think that's the best case. If you find elderly clients that are alone and need some support, get them to one of us that are professionals, and if they're ethical, they will get them to the right individual.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
what key documents or plans do you often find missing when you step into a case?
I would say that stale documents are the most common thing, is that someone says, I did my estate planning 20 years ago. And so everything is still, meaning, life changes, birth, death, divorces, any kind of change in season of life creates changes in your finances, creates changes in your planning. So your planning is a live document that should be updated on a regular basis depending on life's changes.
Yeah.
And so having stale documents can potentially also cause inheritance to not end up the way you wanted or how you wanted it, because laws change all the time too. So it can be interpreted different than what you intended to.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Now, how do you work with senior care slash senior living professionals like senior focused realtors and even placement agents during a case?
If we, an attorney calls us that telling us that they have a client that needs support, they can't take care of themselves anymore and they're living at home. We have relationships with transition experts
Yep.
that help them find a facility to live in at no cost to the client. They charge the facilities are the ones that pay them to bring them individuals to live there. And they're really good at what they do. At least the ones I work with they really try and make a good match for depending on the individual's needs and just the way that they like to live, organizations, groups they like to belong to that might already be at those locations. So those individuals are critical. They're usually pretty kind-hearted people from my experience, very caring, and they help those individuals get there. Then we can work with a realtor like you to put the home on for sale and then create some liquidity for these individuals.
Okay. Now, I know you work all throughout California, but what's unique about handling cases in the Bay Area compared to other places?
Uh, that is such a good question. So every county has their rules on how a fiduciary how they do their work, how they get paid, and knowing county by county how the work is viewed by the judges. And even if you don't have a court supervised case, if you are ever sued, you're looked at, that's kind of the measuring point of what they're looking at in how you perform your work is in whatever county you're working in. Those rules apply to your management of whatever cases you have in that area. So having a qualified attorney who understands that county really matters in you serving your client well and you protecting yourself as a trustee.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Now, I love stories, and I wanted to ask you this. Can you share a success story where your work not only solved the problem, but left the family in a better place?
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, I don't, I didn't set out to create my practice to do a lot of court work, but I do get some of it occasionally. And one of my favorite stories right now, and it's not too far off, is that I had a family, three siblings. They all have the best interest at heart for their mother,
Yeah.
but they couldn't see eye to eye. And so they ended up in court, which is really quite disappointing and sad because that's really not who they were. But they all thought, their decision was the right decision for their mom. Well, after mom passed, I stepped in after they had a court hearing and they decided to remove themselves, and I stepped in. We took care of mom and while she was alive, but once she passed, there was quite a bit of assets, so we had to liquidate and sell. So I got them all on calls. We decided on a plan of action on how we would sell assets and how we would handle each thing. On that call, I realized that's where I learned that they all had the best interest at hand for mom because they did not argue with me on any management of the assets, which is also rare. So
Right.
I knew it was never about the money for this family. It was always about their mom's care, which is really, really nice to see that, they're not always motivated by the money. So we successfully sold everything. They're happy. They couldn't have written more satisfying emails to me, to the realtors, just thanking us for what we did. We just did our job. Really, I can't say that I went above and beyond. I just did exactly what I was supposed to do. And they're very happy. I'm happy that they're satisfied and happy that they got to see our profession in such a positive light. Oftentimes, you just hear the bad stories on the
Yeah.
news, and the Britney Spears story is the most obvious one, right? But that those mistakes are usually caused by non-professionals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love hearing stories like that because it shows how, these situations can actually lead to resolution for families and raving fans on top of that.
Absolutely.
Now, what's one of the most surprising or creative solutions you've used to resolve a fiduciary challenge?
That's a good question. I would say that in this space, the biggest challenges are in my advisory family office piece where families want to transition companies. And, most of the time we've heard that families don't last through the third generation.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's not true. And I think the reason it's not true is because nobody talks about all the success stories for private companies that actually do transition successfully with the right governance.
Okay.
So I support governance structures, creating fiduciary boards, family dynamics boards to make sure we understand and educate the family on family councils, on their finances and how to manage, how to grow their wealth, all of those kinds of things, making sure the family's educated from the top down through generations. And so a lot of times families want to designate, say maybe nobody who is married into the family can actually inherit any part of this company, right? So that it stays within the family, or only until a certain age, or only with a certain expertise. So once I understand the business, how it was created, the core competency, and how the founders want to retain the longevity of that company, we put a structure around it and we communicate it to the family. We have family meetings and we let them get out their opinions about this experience that they will have one day and get the feelings out, address any major issues, and then we put the structure together, we roll it out, and typically it's pretty successful if you bring the right team, a combination of professionals and family members. And so to me, those are probably the most gratifying. They're the longest types of engagements. They have the biggest impact and they also have the biggest wealth retention results.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to give our audience some advice for someone listening right now who feels overwhelmed. What's the first thing they should do?
If they're having what I call estate planning fatigue, which is overwhelmed by planning, um, take a step back. If you need a little bit of time to figure out who your beneficiaries are or whatnot, give yourself that space. Ask your attorney either for a little bit more time on your own or with them to talk through things, and allow yourself that space, but don't let it drag on for years. A few months, give yourself a time frame. I'm going to start this and end it in 3 months. Don't let it drag on. Get it done because it has to be done. You can always amend things.
Yeah.
But get a good plan in place. And if it's in administration of somebody passing or a divorce or somebody becoming disabled or something like that, make sure you get in front of good advisors. If you don't connect to them, find another advisor. Make sure you connect to them. Make sure you feel comfortable with them. Make sure they make you feel confident in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you don't find new advisors, it's okay to not fit with an advisor. It's okay to say, I need to, I need to find a new fiduciary. I need to find a new attorney, a new CPA. It is truly okay. Do not feel guilty. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty in that space. I follow that same philosophy on my end. If there's a client that I can see isn't resonating with me, I will offer to find them a new advisor to work with. And I will say, I have these other individuals that you might connect better with, and I'm okay to introduce you to them. It comes as a shock to people, but I just believe that finding advisors you connect with is more important than just finding any advisor.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Now, what are common misconceptions about fiduciary services you'd like to clear up?
I think you brought it up earlier. This is a second career for most people. If it is, you should ask yourself, why is it a second career? And you want to be with a fiduciary who's very stable, financially savvy. And what I mean by stable, yes, emotionally, but two, also financially stable, because if you're going to work with them and you're going to be managing your assets, you want to know that they have good financial habits themselves in order to manage your family's wealth. And so those are pretty critical to me, understand what they already have done, what they maybe haven't done, and if it really fits your needs. Every fiduciary doesn't do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just a license. It's just like every CPA may practice with entities, individuals, the state. They don't all do the same thing. It's important to ask
Yeah.
what they are really experts at and what they're not. And it's okay if you like the person, but they don't have a skill set. The mismatch is not okay, if you ask me.
Yeah. Yeah. And lastly, any final words and how can people connect with you or learn about your services?
I have a website. It's called d4fiduciary.com. You can see all the different services I provide, myself and my staff. And we have an email address on there that people can email us at, or a phone number they can call us at.
Perfect. And we'll make sure all of that information is included in the show notes for the viewers and listeners. So, Jeanette, thank you so much for this conversation. Your 4Ds, well, actually 5Ds framework really helps eliminate the types of transitions that families often find themselves navigating, sometimes unexpectedly, and why having the right professionals involved can make a meaningful difference. And for everyone listening, if you're currently navigating a senior transition and need to figure out the next steps for a loved one, I've created resources specifically for families that you can access at www.simplifyseniortransitions.com/families. And if you're a professional working in senior care, legal services, healthcare, or housing, and you'd like to collaborate or learn more about the professional network around this work, you can visit www.simplifyseniortransitions.com/professionals. And if you found today's episode helpful, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more families discover these conversations and the resources that can make senior transitions a little less overwhelming. Thanks again for tuning in. Jeanette, one last thank you for being on the show with me today.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And I'll see the rest of you on the next episode of the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast.